The history of South Africa is action-packed with racial violence, territorial conflict, wars of conquest, and inter-ethnic rivalry. There have been Aboriginals living in the region for millennia. However, most of the rest of the population trace their history to immigration. Indigenous Africans in South Africa are descendants of Bantu immigrants from further north in Africa, who first entered what are now the confines of the country roughly 2,000 years ago. White South Africans are descendants of later European settlers, mainly from the Netherlands, Germany, France, and Britain. South Africa was under an official system of racial segregation and white minority rule known as apartheid from 1948 until its first egalitarian elections on April 27, 1994, when the African National Congress came to power and dominated the politics of the country. Some of the customs practiced in South African culture include the patriarchal system. There has been a patriarchal social system in place in the past years. However, in the past quarter century, there has been a movement to give women equality. Men are still the head of the household in most cases, but there has been progress toward equality for women in the domestic as well as public sphere. There is a long history of white minority rule over the majority black population, but in the recent history there have been movements to swing the power to a more egalitarian political system, giving all races equal influence, as well as giving the majority black population proper representation. Many of their customs agree with Western cultures, including the celebration of especially the 21st and 40th birthdays, as the friends of the person usually get together to buy an important gift or do something special for the friend that is reaching this milestone. The customs of South African culture encourage hospitality and politeness at all costs. In fact, one of the worst criticisms is to call a person rude. Food customs are an important aspect of ceremonial gatherings, and especially the black communities, such that the gift and provision of food, centering on the ritual slaughtering of livestock, are central to all rites of passage and notable occasions in black communities. Slaughtering and the brewing of traditional cereal beer are considered the guardians of good fortune, prosperity, and well-being. Because of the evolution of South Africa in the past quarter century, some traditions have continued through this time of change, but some new traditions have come to the surface. Following the end of the apartheid, Nelson Mandela created 7 new holidays aimed at bringing the nation together, including all groups of people to celebrate together. These new holidays include Human Rights Day, Freedom Day, Workers' Day, Youth Day, National Women's Day, and Heritage Day. Also, traditional Christian holidays are recognized because of the 80% Christian population in South Africa. There are also many traditions and norms involving the marriage process in South African culture, and the traditions vary among the different groups. Pre-Christian African marriage in black communities was based on polygamy and bride's wealth, which involved the transfer of wealth in the form of livestock to the family of the bride in return for her productive and reproductive services in the husband's homestead. Christianity and changing economic and social conditions have dramatically reduced the number of men who have more than one wife, although this practice is still legal. Monogamy is the norm in all of the other groups, but divorce rates are about 50%, and cohabitation without marriage is the most common domestic living arrangement in black and colored communities. Despite the fragility of marital bonds, marriage ceremonies are among the most visible and important occasions for sociability and often take the form of an elaborate, multi-sided, and lengthy communal feast involving considerable expenses. People of the Afrikaner and colored groups gather together on weekends for barbecues as a tradition that builds up the strength and bond of the community. Football, rugby, and cricket are all examples of traditional entertainment that South Africans enjoy. A specific example of how a sport in South Africa brought the people together was in 1995 when the Springboks won the Rugby World Cup at home, and Nelson Mandela wore the number 6 jersey of the team's captain, who was a white Afrikaner. The two men embraced, and this demonstrated racial reconciliation. Sport, like no other South African institution, has shown it has the power to heal old wounds. A single moment and 400 years of colonial strife and bitterness suddenly seemed so petty. For the disadvantaged people of the old apartheid South Africa, rugby was the white man's game, and even more so the game of the Afrikaner. Traditionally, most communities of color played soccer, while for white communities, rugby was the winter sport of choice. Things have changed in South Africa since 1994, however, and the South African Rugby Football Union has been working hard to make rugby the game of all South Africans, mainly through an active development program throughout the country. Other traditional ways that South Africans entertain themselves has always been through art, dance, and music, and these long-lasting traditions have been changed over the more recent years by colonialism. Popular entertainment of South Africa includes music such as jazz, hip-hop, and afro-pop, and the Cape Town International Jazz Festival is one of the biggest gatherings of people for entertainment in South Africa. There are magnificent beaches almost surrounding South Africa, so the entertainment business feeds off of this availability in ways such as Durban's beachfront promenade. Another source of modern entertainment is to explore the wildlife of South Africa via a safari into the more forested and desert parts of the country. Because of the heavy European influence that the country has experienced through colonialism, there is an influx of Western entertainment styles, and the World Cup of Soccer even made it to South Africa in 2010. South Africa practices a secular democracy and therefore does not encourage any specific religion politically. However, 80% of the South African population identifies with the Christian religion, including both whites and blacks. There are other small religious groups in South Africa, but Christianity is by far the most prominent. The majority of the black population of mostly indigenous people are a part of the Zion Christian Church, and they believe in ultimate salvation by baptism in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, much like other European sects of Christianity. On the other hand, the white Christian majority practices with the Dutch Reformed Church, which follows the values of the basic Calvinist European Church. Because of South Africa's unbelievable diversity of culture and people, Archbishop Desmond Tutu referred to South Africa as the Rainbow Nation after South Africa's first fully democratic election in 1994. The language of this country reflects this diversity that Tutu was speaking of, due to the fact that there are 11 nationally recognized languages. Afrikaans is the most dominant language in South Africa out of the 11, and here you can see some examples of how English translate into Afrikaans. Here you can see the translation of how "My hovercraft is full of eels" translates from English into Afrikaans, and here is how you say it in Afrikaans.
My skeertuig is vol palings.
The next example shows how to translate Merry Christmas and Happy New Year into Afrikaans, and this is how you say it.
Geseënde Kersfees en 'n gelukkige nuwe jaar.
South Africa possesses the second largest economy in Africa behind only Nigeria, and is considered an upper middle income economy. South Africa is one of the most progressive countries on earth, and their economic system leans toward capitalistic principles, and there is minimal intervention by the federal government. The economy shifted from a primary and secondary economy to an economy driven by the tertiary sector in the present day. Some of the primary sources of the South African economy include the businesses of mining, agriculture, fisheries, vehicle manufacturing, food processing, clothing and textiles, and tourism. These are just a few. A recent concern of the country has been the rising unemployment rate, as it is above 25% now. And this is a concern because a high unemployment rate can lead to things such as violence and more poverty. Although they have some concerns, South Africa is the world's largest producer of chrome, manganese, platinum, and vanadium. The government system of South Africa is based on a multi-party democracy that is made up of 3 tiers, which include an independent judiciary that follows the Constitution, a legislative authority made up of the Parliament, and an executive branch which includes the President, who is voted on every 5 years. This is quite a different system from the previous white minority rule that was present during the apartheid before 1994. South Africa is under the law of the new Constitution, which is much like the Constitution of America, including an emphasis on ideas such as equality, freedom of expression and association, property, housing, healthcare, education, access to information, and access to courts. The previously mentioned rainbow returns again as there are 16 parties present in the diverse parliament, but the African National Congress is the most dominant. The family structure involves a nuclear family and extended family or tribe in South Africa, and in the past the tribe has been of more importance to the indigenous people living there because it provides emotional and financial protection. The indigenous people value the extended family or tribe more, and the white Europeans value the nuclear family more. In addition to these family ties, people of South Africa like to socialize in groups called kin groups. Recognition of lengthy family lines and extended family relationships are common to all the population groups, most formally among Indian and blacks. Before Africans, the clan, a group of people descended from a single remote male ancestor, symbolized by a totemic animal and organized politically around a chiefly title, is the largest kinship unit. These clans often include hundreds of thousands of people and apply their names to branches extending across ethnic boundaries so that a blood relationship is not an organizing feature of clanship. Social groups also form out of a common enjoyment that they get out of watching sports like soccer, rugby, and cricket, and clubs are devoted to these sports for people that enjoy them very much. Lastly, traditional and contemporary theater and music bring people together to take part in the events, and this causes a type of social group. Healthcare and diseases are both major concerns for the population of South Africa, especially the colored population. There is a first-class but limited modern healthcare sector for those with medical coverage or the money to pay for the treatment. Government subsidies, public hospitals and clinics are overstressed, understaffed, and are struggling to deal with the needs of a majority of the population that was undeserved during white minority rule. A highly developed traditional medical sector of herbalists and diviners provides treatment for physical and psycho-spiritual illnesses to millions in the black population, including some people who also receive treatment from modern health professionals and facilities. South Africa has a high HIV infection rate, and if successful strategies for AIDS prevention and care are not implemented, 25% of the country's young women will die before age 30. The problems of poverty and hunger have also continued over the last few years, as white minority rule and the policy of racial segregation, disempowerment, and suppression left the government a legacy of problems that amount to a social crisis. Unrepresentative government and repressive racial regulations created mistrust of the law among the black majority. Unemployment is high and rapidly increasing, with the economy losing over 1 million jobs since 1994. Accompanying this situation are some of the highest crime rates in the world. The education and healthcare systems are failing in the economically depressed communities. The collapse of family farming and the dismissal of thousands of black farm workers have created a rural crisis that has forced dispossessed and unemployed rural people to flock to the cities. Shanty towns, or informal areas, have popped up as the government has struggled to provide housing for migrants in a situation of rapid inner-city commercial decline and physical decay. The established black townships also are plagued with unemployment, crime, and insecurity, including drug dealing, alcoholism, rape, domestic violence, and child abuse. The government has imposed high taxes to transfer resources from the wealthy, formerly white, but now racially mixed suburbs to pay for services and upgrading in the poorer, economically unproductive areas. Although considerable progress has been made, the government and the private sector have been hampered by endemic corruption and white-collar crime. The interracial conflict that could have presented a major difficulty after centuries of colonial and white minority domination has proved to be a manageable aspect of post-apartheid political culture, partly as a result of the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission between 1997 and 1999. Human rights are also a large aspect of life in South Africa. Just a quarter century ago, the majority group of colored people were considerably oppressed by the white minority group that was in power. Basic human rights were taken from these people during this time, and that is why the African National Congress was formed to fight for equality and representation. As a result of internal pressures as well as foreign nations imposing punishments on South Africa's oppression, the South African authorities opened up the system to an egalitarian system in which Nelson Mandela won the presidential election as the first man of color to do so. Following this time in the 1990s, the human rights aspect has reasonably improved over the years, but there are still struggles that people and younger people must continue to worry about, especially. It is estimated that 500,000 women are raped in South Africa every year, with the average woman more likely to be raped than complete secondary school. A 2009 survey found 1 in 4 South African men admitted to raping someone, and another survey found 1 in 3 women out of 4,000 surveyed women said they had been raped in the past year. Since the end of the apartheid, the human rights of people living in South Africa have improved pretty dramatically, but there are still struggles of racial violence and discrimination, as well as poverty and violence playing a role in the lives of the youth and the people in general.
Umunati,